Internet. Today is Thursday, the 23rd of November. I shall be addressing the spectacular lack of political awareness displayed by Israeli politicians. It seems that the current generation of Israeli politicians believe the lies the state of Israel has been peddling. I am referring to their version of the Holocaust, which did not end in 1945 but continues until the present day. This allows them to transfer in one fell swoop of imagination the notion of a universal and eternal anti-Semitism to the present and attach it to the new Nazis, Palestinians. There is no need to belabor this point. It is self-evident to everyone but the most dim-witted. But how is it possible that the Israeli state has come to be led by such complete ignoramuses at all? I will address two factors that have contributed significantly to this situation. The first of these is the decidedly one-dimensional understanding of the Holocaust with which the State of Israel has adorned itself as a sort of national myth, culminating in the Jewish phoenix rising from the ashes of the Warsaw Ghetto and the smokestacks of Auschwitz crematoria. It's a story, and in due course we can begin to connect this contemporary myth of the birth of the State of Israel to the religious consciousness of a people who dispersed around the earth, maintained the belief in a special destiny of God's chosen people, both as solace and as source of hope. The second factor I wish to explore is that of the numerous religious and political factions that comprise the Israeli Jewish electorate, whose divisions and divisive political manipulations have continually drawn the country towards the right. Rather than considering these politically powerful entities as a healthy sign of a fledgling democracy with lots of tolerance and lots of diversity of opinion, I will argue that these divisions have exasperated political conflict and caused a rift with secular society. While since the Reformation it has been common for democratic states to eschew religious interference, in Israel politicians of both left and right underestimated the corroding influence of religion and promoted it when it suited their political needs. With the gradual introduction of religious groups such as the fanatical settlers who occupied the Sinai Peninsula, then Gaza and the West Bank, successive Israeli governments have created a monster that they can't control. It requires a great deal of imagination to believe that Israeli politicians did not see the problem coming when what they have actually done is successively empower parts of their own Jewish population to defy the law and ignore international law. But as one travels through the land of Israel, as I did, I was constantly struck by how insular Israeli political consciousness truly is. The different religious and political groups simply hardly ever meet and interact because each is relentlessly pursuing their own goals without an overarching consciousness of the ridiculousness of whatever goal it is that they are trying to achieve. Not only that, but many pursue their aims in direct contradiction to whatever values and ideals they profess. In some instances, it can be argued that such groups seek to overthrow the state entirely, but without having the slightest idea what to replace it with. Israeli political consciousness generally straddles and ignores the traditional Marxist left-wing, right-wing divide, particularly due to the special relationship to the communist world, to which many in Israel point as evidence of the failure of Marxist analysis. The problem is that Jewish ethnicity hardly substitutes for the loss of political solidarity and consciousness. The kibbutz movement, largely left-wing and supporting labor, has slowly weaned itself off that loyalty as many kibbutzim adopted more libertarian notions of production and ownership, and thus became functionally integrated into the neoliberal American agenda that Israel embraced wholeheartedly during the 1990s. As a consequence, the Israeli left has all but been obliterated in terms of its political influence, since it could never develop into a full-fledged internationalist left wing due to its extreme focus being determined continually by internal contradictions, including successive Palestinian uprisings. The Israeli left are rapidly turning into a persecuted minority with very little support from abroad. They have effectively disqualified themselves from political participation. Consequently, Israel is sliding towards the extreme right by default. It remains for historians to draw comparisons between the collapse of the Israeli left and the collapse of the Social Democrats in Germany prior to Hitler coming to power. To return to the question of the understanding of the Holocaust that Israel has carefully curated at home and abroad, it must be pointed out that this understanding is not significantly at odds with that generally accepted by historians and institutions around the world. The foundations for that understanding were laid in Nuremberg. Nuremberg largely, if not entirely, focused on the perpetrators and especially on the industrialized murder of civilians in concentration camps. In so doing, it completely ignored the historical context and economic conditions that preceded the rise of Nazism. It is difficult to believe no one had thought of exploring this subject at the time. But the effect was to absolve the British and Germans, Belgians and French and Americans for the horrors they committed during the colonial era, and which they repeated throughout the Second World War, for example with the firebombing of Dresden and the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The trials created the impression that there was an us, good, ethical, civilized, and a them, Germans, but never got around to the more thorny question of how modern nation states, such as Germany, in the middle of Europe, had descended into barbarity on an industrial scale, not once but twice in the same century. And that question has yet to be answered. In any case, Israeli propaganda has largely built on the Nuremberg understanding of the Nazi persecution of Jews by focusing on the issue of anti-Semitism as opposed to, for example, the issue of class and the lack of real political power available to those at the bottom of the economic ladder under capitalism. The sanctioned hegemonic understanding of the Holocaust available to Israeli youth and echoed over and over again by their media is one devoid of political analysis. It therefore provides no basis for contemporary Israelis to draw lessons for today from the Holocaust, and any comparisons are generally ridiculed and vehemently denied as, you guessed it, anti-Semitism. The extreme polarization of Israeli consciousness around the two subjects outlined above, insurmountable political, cultural and religious divisions for which the modern state should serve as protection on the one hand, and a dangerously simplistic understanding of the Holocaust that can provide a foundation of criticism, undermine Israel. the possibility of Jewish-Palestinian unity in the face of an overtly authoritarian government disappears. In fact, it is more likely that solidarity were to emerge between right-wing or conservative religious Jewish groups and their Palestinian counterparts. The future facing Israel is that of a theocracy. But what is more probable in the short term is the Lebanization of Israeli society as it fractures into its different and conflicting self-interest groups, and the army being forced to step in. The Israeli state that Zionist leaders imagined is dead. I don't think those old Zionists could have imagined how deeply divided Jews have become due to the creation of the State of Israel, and as I argue above, it is not so much the creation of the state itself as the lack of rationality and awareness that allowed ruling elites to become fabulously wealthy and powerful while ignoring the future they have created for both Jews and Palestinians. Aho.